welcome back, everybody. And we have Tim and I have a mystery guest this week. Mystery guest, give us a hint of who you are.
It's Mark Kaiser. Oh, was that too strong of a hint?
As if that clarifies it for so many people out there. Who?
There we go. That's too good. So yeah, it's all three of us today. So you know, right out of the gate, we've been to let people know we have been having a chat about doing a new podcast with the three of us, a video podcast. Be different from this thing. So we've been having these conversations. They've been bouncing around a lot. And Tim, what do we want from the people?
Well, I think as I knock my camera off my thing here, get back. This is what I think we want from the people. Help us design, help us figure out this podcast. We think we know what we're going to do. But hey, it's a podcast that we're hoping a whole lot of you will join us on, so you might as well have some influence over it. One of the things you might help us do is name it. We've come up with several really terrible names, which doesn't mean we won't use them. That doesn't matter at all. I like the Alan Smithy podcast.
But there already is one.
Well, there already is one, you know, but, you know, what are you going to do? So you can help us name. What are some of the names you guys tossed out?
Well, we talked about Suck It Hollywood, but Mark felt that was too negative. I don't know.
It isn't. Here's the thing. The name has to show some sense of, it has to be unique. It can't be generic. It has to give a sense of the attitude that we have, what the show is going to include, the idea that we have these amazing, you know, opinions that nobody else has, that we're going to tell it to you straight, let you know what's going on. It can't just be a name like The Three Guys Who Talk About Things. It's got to be something that's got some attitude.
Well, look, this is what we know we're going to do. We're going to do some film reviews, so some legit real-time film review business on this podcast. We know we're going to do that. So a little bit of what Wade and I do on Film Week, and of course Mark over at so we're going to do that. But then everything else is a bit up. We know we're going to take you behind the scenes in Hollywood and give the audience the benefit of our 30 plus years, you know, in this business and behind the scenes of this business. We're going to tell you stuff we know. We know we're going to do that. We're going to have some guests every now and again because we know people too. So we know we're going to do that. And I don't know. That's about it that I can think of. Everything else will depend on what folks want to hear.
Because we spend the first part of this podcast doing, you know, inside Hollywood stuff, and it never feels like it's enough. And the business is changing. Things are pivoting away from packaged media, and streaming is even in a, you know, even like digital versus streaming and SVOD and all the various VODs. They're all it's all kind of everything's in play. And every week and every day, there are these deadline stories, and they all just kind of go out there without any commentary. And, you know, we thought, honestly, we've got a lot to say about all these stories. So it would be great to have a chance to, you know, whatever the big stories of the week are, whether it's, you know, Johnny and Amber or, you know, Tom Cruise and his career sky high greatest success coming at nearly age 60. Things like that warrant conversation. And we thought, well, who better to do that, to provide that conversation than three of us?
Exactly.
And there it is.
Exactly.
So essentially, it's the same show you're doing now, except they get to see our faces.
Yes, you have to shave.
And I think we'll.
Although Tim's beard is kind of coming in nicely.
Well, you know, whatever. Me and Santa.
Yeah.
Me and Santa.
I don't dare do that because it will age me about 30 years if I do that. So
I can tell you the exact day I started to grow this beard. I can tell you the exact day.
Really?
December 5th, 1995.
Really?
Oh, yes, sir.
December 5th, 1995?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Ask me how I know that.
How do you know that?
Because on December 5th, 1995, I was hit by a car and went to the hospital and I had stitches all over, but I had stitches in my chin, so I couldn't shave.
Oh.
By the time I got the stitches out, I said, you know what? I think I'm halfway to a beard anyway. I'm just going to keep going.
All right.
And I
Well,
kept
there you
going.
go.
I've had the beard ever since.
You know, speaking of that,
on the other podcast.
yeah, I remember when that happened, and I remember you recounting. In fact, I just told this to somebody yesterday. That a person leaned over, where they were talking to the cops or something, and you only overheard them say, "Wow, he flew."
Oh yeah, so I'm laying on the ground on the corner of Georgina and Ocean Avenue in Santa Monica, and I'm just like moaning like an animal. And these people are gathered around me, and then the ambulance comes. When the ambulance comes, I hear one bystander say to the other bystander, "Boy, he really flew."
And the reason that came up was, I don't know if you saw this. I do not recommend that anybody go look for this. So even though I know all of you morbid, sick, fascinated people are going to go running to the internet immediately to try to dig this up, don't do it because it's horrifying. I showed it to my wife and I was immediately berated. Why are you showing that to me? So there was some cops in Texas pulled over. This is the dark side of having cops and police cars wired up with video because it goes viral. And it gets edited. They pulled over a guy for potentially smuggling immigrants, right? Mm-hmm. And for bringing in illegal immigrants. And he was in like a van or something. And you see the cop's body cam as they're pulling the guy out of the car and you know, locking him up. And then this video cuts to their car, the car cam, the dash cam behind the thing, as the door on the van opens up, and one of the illegal immigrants that is being smuggled runs out, starts to run across this wide open highway and is hit by a car going about 60 miles an hour and killed instantly. I mean, there's no question. Yes. And his body flies for like 30 feet in the air. I've never seen such a horrifying thing in my life. And I saw that and I thought, I'll bet that's what happened to Mark, except he survived.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that is just, anyway,
it's truly horrifying. And Tim, the look on your face, that's the look that my wife just gave me when I showed it to her. And then I got hit.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
We do.
Are you saying that Tim looks like your wife?
Sometimes, actually.
I wish I were that pretty. That's ridiculous. And by the way, I mean pretty. I wish I were that pretty. Not handsome. Perfectly happy to be pretty, okay? I'm that kind of guy.
And by the way, I put a lot into our DigiGods review of Elvis. Man, I really worked that thing for a number of days. It was a heavy lift, but I had to get it out. So please go to DigiGods.com and read my Elvis review so I feel validated. Neither of you have seen the film yet, have you?
Both. I thought Mark had seen it. No, Mark?
I've seen it.
No, Mark's seen it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. One of the things that we'll do, but in the other podcast is talk about that movie. It's interesting because you guys, I've read your piece and talked to you both about it. I haven't seen it yet. So I'm going to before we do the other podcast because I think it'll be an interesting conversation. You guys feel a little bit differently about it. And so Mark, I'm going to let you go first. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not the hugest Baz Luhrmann fan. I feel like he makes, feature-length montages, not necessarily movies. And I kind of wonder what his motivation was to even make this film. I don't know that he really loves Elvis that much. I just think that he saw in Elvis a way to do what he does in a very effective way. So what I did like about it is that Austin Butler's terrific. I mean, when he dances, you can't fake that. I mean, he is, no matter how much Baz Luhrmann cuts those scenes up, you can tell that kid's got it, right? Yeah. Looks like Elvis, sounds enough like Elvis, sings enough like Elvis. He's great. And I like the fact that it did take pains to connect Elvis back to the black music of that era that he was so influenced by. And not only reminding everybody that Elvis is great, but reminding everybody that the black music of that era was so great. And it really was the fertile soil from which so many other bands sprung forth, whether it's everybody from the Rolling Stones, who are they're very honest about how the fact that they were influenced by that genre of music all the way to Elvis. So I like that. What I didn't like is the fact that it's basically just a 2.5 hour, montage of images.
I think it's a half a montage, and I say this in the review too. I think once you get to late stage Elvis, that's where Boz wanted to get. I think he's racing to get there. I think he wants to make certain points. I think he definitely wants to remind you that Elvis was inspired by a whole collection of black artists who never enjoyed his level of success, but he sort of brought their music to the world. We forget a lot of those early songs, those Elvis songs. He was not the first person to record them. They were recorded sometimes 10, 50. That's right. A long time earlier by other artists. And he just re-recorded them and put his spin on them. Hound Dog, perfect example, you know? Mm-hmm. I think Boz is compelled by that aspect of the story. And then I think he wants to just get to 1968 Comeback Special in a hurry, because Elvis in black leather and lamb chops is just the coolest thing ever. And he settles in there. And I mean, Vegas Elvis, that's where the movie comes alive for me, is that whole last half where it's Elvis from 1968 till he died. And I love all that. I thought it was great.
Fat Elvis is actually my favorite Elvis. I'm just going to say it. That guy, you know what? Because he's like, I don't give a damn. Yeah. I'm Elvis Presley, and you all love me. I'm going to take my fat ass out on the stage. I'm putting on these bell bottoms, and I'm going to unzip this shirt down here. And you know what? He was right. We loved him. I was 16 when Elvis died. Elvis was a present figure in my life for my entire childhood.
I mean, it was go ahead, Mark.
If you go back and watch some YouTube videos of Elvis performing on stage, you know, Baz Luhrmann can take Gilbert Gottfried and turn him into like the world's greatest pop icon, right? Because that's what Baz does. He'll cut it up and there'll be sound effects and edits and montages until Gilbert Gottfried is like the Beatles. But if you take a look at video of Elvis, you will realize that Elvis really was the actual real deal, and Baz Luhrmann is only really just increasing the myth more than he is creating the myth, because Elvis really was that great.
Neither one of you mentioned Tom Hanks. Neither one of you mentioned Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks is not even really close to what the Colonel Parker was, but he's the foil in this thing, and he's fascinating, and he creates, you know, he even if he's not doing a great impression of the Colonel, he's doing his own kind of deal on it, like he did with Walt Disney, right? And so you can't take your eyes off him, because he's so venal. You're sort of amazed that Elvis was actually manufactured by this just venal, money grubbing, fat, you know, slime ball who came out of the carny circuit. I mean, it's amazing. But there it is.
It sounds interesting that the film didn't. It's funny because after a while the film kind of lost its focus, because at the beginning it's all Colonel Parker. You don't even see Elvis until 10 minutes into the movie.
It's about 10 minutes into the movie, yeah.
So you think, here's a movie that's actually told from the point of view of the villain, which would be Tom Parker. And so I liked that new way in. But then after a while, once Elvis gets famous and once he starts touring around the country, they lose that thread. And then by the end, it kind of peters out and comes into this inconclusive ending about him where I can't remember anymore, but it's like, it didn't feel like it really took the idea of telling the story from the point of view of the villain and really taking it to the end. Because I just think that in the end, Baz was just looking for a way to just double down on Elvis.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the name of the movie is Elvis, so I suppose that's fair. I will say this, as having not seen the movie before, the question that I posed you guys before you went to see it had to do with the black community. You know, Chuck D, it had that thing that he said in that rap record 20 years ago about Elvis, but I always remembered Elvis being beloved in the black community.
And your dad was a musician, so
my dad was a musician and a drummer. He loved Elvis. I knew Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry loved Elvis. Chuck Berry's from St. Louis. And Little Richard and all those guys. And at the time, Elvis was played on black radio. Black folks loved Elvis, and Elvis, frankly, put a lot of money in a lot of black people's pockets. Musicians, people who worked for him, and Chuck Berry said, "I love Elvis. That white boy got me paid more than anybody I ever met, because Elvis made it okay for white people to buy his records."
There's a couple things on that, which is, I mean, it's so true. not only was Elvis completely honest and didn't hide the fact that he loved this music and was influenced by this music, but having been to Memphis and I went to Graceland, that whole thing, when I went to visit Stax Records, it was so fascinating the reason why Stax was so popular and so and just was a real turning point in popular music, because at the time in Memphis, which was quite segregated, here were black and white musicians going to Stax Record to record these amazing songs, and it was like nothing. They're just musicians who respected each other and played. That was it. So within the boiling cauldron of this racial strife in Memphis and in the South at the time, here is this one music studio where black and whites who they didn't care that they were black, they were white. They were just musicians who played great music, and it was an oasis of that. And so the whole Memphis scene was sort of about that.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Yeah.
I will also say too that I know many people, and I am one of them, and I've had this conversation with them, where the defeatist cycle that traps so many black men in the inner city, that has gone on now for generations, that escapes most people who do not come from that part of the country, from the cities, who do not come from that cultural center. That was first communicated to them by a song sung by Elvis Presley and written by another white guy, Mac Davis, in the Ghetto. When you listen to that song, I mean, I can't listen to that song without crying. I every single time, because it just goes right into my spine. It goes right through my nerves. And you listen to it and you just think that is the saddest, most horrible song. But it communicates something. It communicates a cycle that has been visited on so many generations. And I don't think most people would have actually processed that, especially at that time in the civil rights movement, in that era, if it hadn't have been sung by Elvis Presley. I think that communicated that cycle to so many people that it moved a substantial part of the country. And a lot of that is part of this movie. I mean, the death of Martin Luther King, the death of Bobby Kennedy, all that stuff is a part of the story. So for all of its craziness, and I say this in the review, for all of its craziness and its Bozness, it has that punctuation, right? Those moments that they work. And then it goes crazy for 20 minutes, and then it hits you in the heart again. And then it goes crazy for 20 minutes, and then it hits you in the heart again. And when it's done, you go, that was 159 minutes of about 100 minutes of that was just Boz editing the crap out of stuff, and I got a headache. But about 59 minutes of it really gets me in the gut. And that's enough.
Tim, the moral of the story is go see the movie.
Go see the movie, and we'll talk about it again behind the paywall.
All right. Well, let's get into DVDs and Blu-rays. I got a whole bunch of cult stuff here. I'm going to kick through right now. And by the way, end of the show, I'm going to let Mark and Tim go. I'm going to do the thing that Mark loves the most. I'm going to do a whole half hour on my own of anime, because I don't want anybody else to suffer through that.
Great, because I have laundry to do. Wait, I have laundry to do. I want to know that I can schedule that at the end of the podcast.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so I'll cap everything with anime, but first, make mention of a couple of Severin titles here. This is all exploitation stuff. This is all cult stuff. So Siege is nothing.
Laundry going in. Laundry going in now.
Siege is.
By the way, I'm not kidding. Laundry going in. Wait.
Okay. Siege is a Canadian exploitation film. I wouldn't worry too much about it. Canadian exploitation films are worse than American exploitation films. It's kind of like The Warriors a little bit, but it's lower.
Is that the one from like the 80s?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay, I know that. That's a good bad movie.
And then we also have Invaders of the Lost Gold, which I think is also is pretty fun. It's got nudity, and it's got some really bad makeup effects and all that kind of stuff. This is from the guy who made Escape from Women's Prison and The Wild World of James
Alan, what's his name?
Dick Randall.
Dick Randall. Okay.
Dick Randall. So anyway, directed by Alan Birkinshaw.
That's the guy I'm thinking of. That's the guy I'm thinking of. Yeah, that's the
Dick
guy.
Randall produced it, but Alan Birkinshaw.
All those terrible movies in the Philippines. They were always in the Philippines because he could make it for $1.50.
That's it.
Yeah, I know that guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Woody Strode. Woody Strode is in that movie, dude.
This is
Invaders of the Lost Gold. Woody Strode.
You're right. Boy, you're right, dude. You get an A for today. My goodness, Tim Cogshell, you
I
just
watched a bunch
nailed
of
it.
bad movies, man.
Oh
That's
my
a fresh
goodness,
day.
yes. It's this is an '80s movie shot in the Philippines. Takes place during they're fighting the Japanese at the end of World War II, basically. Tons of these movies. My friend Ferdy Grofé Jr. made a ton of movies like that in the Philippines back in the '70s. This is about a decade later. They kind of picked up the baton from him, and it's not very good. But it's cheesy. It's cheesy and
Yeah.
entertaining, and that says something. Got 3 here from Altered Innocence as well. This is some very interesting stuff. Altered Innocence is like a step above usual exploitation stuff. So we get this kind of like pseudo quasi vampirish thing called Arrebato, Arrebato. Really a kind of a very strange and unusual film. It's like a it's sort of like a vampire film, but it's like a drug film at the same time. So it's apparently, according to the notes, by the way, and I don't know this, according to the notes, this is Almodovar's favorite horror film. Now, cannot validate that, cannot verify that, but I could definitely see it. So there's a little bit of a snuff filmy thing going on, Super 8, right? You'll see when you watch it. I recommend people watch this Arrebato. It's really kind of a cool vintage alternative Euro sleaze, Euro trash thing made for about $1.50, and it's got its whole hallucinogenic aspect to it. It's very unusual.
That's late 70s as opposed to that stuff from the
late 70s
stuff from the early.
sure.
This is like late 70s, and
it's not even really giallo. It's not even really giallo. It's almost more in the vein of like it's a little Jess Franco.
But more like Blowout.
There's a little Jess Franco in there. There's a little bit of what's the name of the French guy who made all those trashy movies around the same time as Jess Franco? Can't remember his name. Anyway, it's that stuff. And then from both Altered Innocence and Mondo Macabro, and I got a bunch of Mondo Macabro stuff to mention here as well, is The Wild Boys and After Blue. You know what? I mean, it's just this is trashy. I don't want to call it borderline porn, but it sometimes sort of feels like it. I mean, whatever. It is what it is. So if you're a fan of Valerian Borowicz, who made a lot of really, really cheesy movies, you'll probably thoroughly enjoy this. This is a whole series of these nasty little borderline stag films. I can't really recommend any of them, but it's called Apocalypse After, and these are films made by a guy named Bertrand Mandico, and it includes The Wild Boys and After Blue and all this other stuff on here. It is what it is. Knock yourselves out. The Islands of Jan Gonzalez. This is 7 short films and other works by Jan Gonzalez. If you've never heard of Jan Gonzalez, you're probably not going to want to actually watch it. But Jan Gonzalez is one of those guys who just made some really trippy pre-David Lynch stuff. And a lot of it is here. There's music videos on here. They're like weird monsters, and there are, all kinds of surrealistic nonsense. I don't know how you made money back in the day doing this kind of stuff, but apparently somebody did. And then there's a whole, seriously, it's just weirdness to the nth degree. A bunch of Mondo Macabro movies here. Too many to really get into, but I'm going to roll through some of the titles because they tell you everything you need to know. The Laughing Woman by Piero Shivazappa, starring Dagmar Lassander and Philip Leroy. That's kind of nasty. We got School of Death, which takes place in a girls' school, and anything that takes place in a girls' school that was made in the 1970s. This is from 1975, Spanish film. You know that the girls are not going to have a good time. Bad things are going to happen, and it's just bad. It takes place in Victorian London, but it's a Spanish film. Got Succubus. Now, a lot of films are named Succubus. This is Sukkubus. This is Sukkubus. I don't understand the pun. This is made in 1989 in Germany by a guy named George Tressler. It is really low budget and it's pretty nasty. And I didn't know that they made movies this bad in Germany, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Seriously. Then we got a Japanese film called Hiruko the Goblin. This was made in 1990. Japanese exploitation, otherwise known as Japsploitation. Really stylish. They spent a lot more on this than they should have. It's kind of J horror before there was such a thing as J horror, or maybe on the border of it. This is the second film by the director Shinja Tsukamoto, and there's an interview with him on it, and I didn't find it very enlightening. But The Designated Victim was made in 1971, and this stars Tomas Milian and Pierre Clementi. This is one of those kind of spy things that they made for like $14, and it's not very good. We also have Human Animals. I love the tagline on this. 2 men, 1 woman, and a dog. It's the end of the world.
You could take that a whole bunch of ways, man.
I know.
I mean, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. This was made in 1983. It's terrible. The dog is probably the best performance in the thing. It actually reminded me a little bit of Damnation Alley. I'm not quite sure why, but
I love Damnation Alley.
I know you do.
They had giant scorpions. Remember when the giant scorpions attacked the little tent?
It was so realistic. So
I thought it was a documentary. It was so realistic.
David Hemmings, before he got fat and old, was in a lot of attractive things, and one of them was "It's Nothing, Mama, Just a Game." Terrible title. That was made in 1974, and this is one of these Spanish things, and I'm not sure why he's even in this movie, but he plays this. I think he's dubbed through the whole thing too. If he's not dubbed by someone else, he's doing a very bad job dubbing himself. But it's basically about a guy who's just a horrible, sadistic woman abuser, and people are supposed to get off on that. I don't know. Silip, Daughters of Eve. You know what? Filipino film from 1986. Basically there to just show off a lot of hot Filipino women and muscular Filipino men. That's pretty much it. There doesn't seem to be much of a plot in here. I think they cast some beauty queens in it as well. Hotel Fear is not that scary. This is by Francesco Barilli, Italian exploitation film made in a co-production with Spain in 1976. Obviously, didn't get a lot of traction around the world because we just don't remember this movie. It's the first time ever released in the United States. Good luck. And then Strangler versus Strangler. For whom do you root? I just don't know. But basically, this is one of the most ridiculous exploitation films I've ever seen in my life. This is Serbian from 1984, right before they started. Right, I know it's like under communism, you'd have thought that they would have had a better grip on these things. So yeah, the idea is that you got 2 guys who there's not enough room for 2 serial killers in Belgrade in the mid 1980s. There's only one, so they've got to figure out who's going to be the Belgrade Strangler. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. It makes no sense whatsoever. And then lastly, we've got a bunch of stuff here from Cult Epics. Always love the stuff that Cult Epics comes up with. Very interesting old movie. This is a much more serious film from Just Yekin. This is Madame Claude, which has a great musical score by Serge Gainsbourg, to be honest. Oh. That's the main reason to watch this. Klaus Kinski's in it. Fair enough. He's in a lot of stuff. There's a lot of nudity, and it's very Emmanuel-esque, but it's the Gainsbourg music that really makes it great. You got to check it out. Just Yekin, kind of a hack, made in 1977, but boy, the music is really, 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 really great. Gainsbourg, just the best. Got Tinto Brass, P.O. Box. This is a 2-disc limited edition, which includes a documentary on Tinto Brass that tells you a lot more than you really want to know. I just didn't need to see the interview. I don't need to know anything more about Tinto Brass than I do. Tim has often made the point that Tinto Brass is basically just a lot of women walking around with garter belts and no pants. Did I represent that? Tim's nodding. Yeah.
Exactly. Hey, man, that's what it is.
That's
hey,
kind of.
honey,
That's kind of.
put your
Yeah.
panties on, sweetie. Put your panties on.
Yeah. Tinto Brass, he has a quote that is quoted on the back of this box. I've got to read it. I know we try to keep this show at least a little bit classy sometimes, but this tells you everything that you need to know about Tinto Brass. And here we go. Quote, pornography is there to give you an erection. Erotica is there to give you emotions. Close quote. Now, I frankly think that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, but I'm glad that Tinto believes it.
Yeah.
I'm glad that he thinks that makes sense.
Tinto was born in 33. He's older than my dad. He's clocking 90 or something like that. That's nuts. Man.
Yeah. Well, there it is. Got 99.9 Frequency of Terror. This is a film by a guy named Augusti Villaronga. Never heard of him. Never heard of the film. It's a horror film. I blew through this pretty quickly. It's stylish. I think it's better than most of these things. It's made in '97, so it's a lot more recent. It's Spanish again. It's Spanish exploitation. Is there a name for Spanish exploitation films? Spain exploitation, Spanish exploitation. I don't think there is, because we have like black exploitation, Oz exploitation, Jap exploitation. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of those terms, but nothing.
Yeah.
Given all the Jess Franco crap, you would think they would have coined one.
Maybe they just call them Jess Franco films. Maybe that's just say that, and it covers the whole thing.
And then, lastly, this is quite interesting. We have a couple of films from Nouchka van Brakel. I'm sure I'm completely mutilating that name. But Nouchka van Brakel, a director with whom I was not familiar, a 70s and 80s era Dutch filmmaker, feminist director of, all kinds of films that are sort of somewhere between softcore feminism and exploitation feminism. It's kind of weird because it's not quite Doris Wishman. It's like a more stylish than Doris Wishman, but yet not as high-minded. It's kind of, I would sort of be curious to see more of her films if I had time and if I didn't have so many other things to do. But for the time being, these are both certainly enough. But if you want to discover the very curious kind of sophisticated period erotic world of Nouchka van Brakel, these two films are out from Cult Epics: A Woman Like Eve and The Cool Lakes of Death. They are arty. They are a little bit Emmanuel-ish. They definitely are exploitation, but they are really, really good transfers, and they are from the late 70s and early 80s, and quite interesting. So there it is. That's our exploitation stuff for the day. Oh, one more real quickly. The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue. One of the silliest zombie movies ever made. This is from Synapse Films, but I really enjoy this. If you're going to make a zombie movie, make it stupid. Just go all the way and make it completely ridiculous. And boy, this just takes everything that Romero pioneered, and it just pushes it right over the edge into self-parody on a level I can't recommend this highly enough. From 1974, The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue is hilarious. It is hilarious. You will laugh so hard. I did. You're going to love it.
I love zombie movies. Don't say, if you're going to do a zombie movie, make it ridiculous. I love zombie movies. Come on. World War Z, Train to Busan, 28 Weeks Later.
Ordinary People.
You know what? Mary Tyler Moore. She barely had to put on any makeup to be a zombie.
There you go. That's it. That's what it is.
I love Mary Tyler. Don't do that. Hey man, can we do some 4K new movie
I was
stuff?
just grabbing them. You just dive
We
in.
can't do that. Wade still has another 75 movies no one's ever heard of to do.
Right, there we go.
Go, Wade, make it happen.
All right.
Dude, that Nick Cage movie, that's the reason why I want to talk about that Nick Cage movie. Yeah, the massive
Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, which is a Nick Cage movie in which Nick Cage plays Nick Cage. And I don't know, this movie struck me as very, very interesting conceptual. Obviously one thinks of being John Malkovich or whatever, like that, but it just did not work. It has these moments where it's very, 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 very funny. but ultimately it does not work. And I don't know, but at least that's what I think anyway. But there it is. What do you think about this Nick Cage movie?
You know what? I thoroughly enjoyed this, even though I knew in my bones that it was not good. No, I mean, you do. It's on 4K. It's 4K Blu-ray combo, and I mean, look, it's one of those movies where you know what they're doing and you know it's not working, but you're just glad they're doing it. You're glad that Nick Cage is playing himself, that he's taking pot shots at his own career. I mean, the whole idea is he wants to quit acting because he's just not being fed as an actor. And then he gets an offer to go and, vamp for some guy he's like a super wealthy guy in Spain. They shot the whole thing in Malta. They didn't even shoot it in Spain. And and he goes to meet this guy. He's going to get paid $1 million for what is it? Just to appear at his birthday party? I can't even remember what he's.
So
what
yeah,
he's
the guy has a screenplay, of course, and he talks to you.
Played by Pedro Pascal. Pedro Pascal is the guy.
But there's this whole other storyline that has Tiffany Haddish and the other guy there, and they're like FBI agents, and that guy is really some sort of a big, criminal. This kind of, it's just, and you're right. So the whole time, Nick Cage is sort of poking fun at himself, and there's this other version of him in the movie with better hair, and they've
that's right. They have the CGI version of his old self who torments him.
It's hysterical. That's all great and hysterical, but then we wander off into this stupid movie that has the guy, the stuff, and I'm like, just stay out of that dumbass movie. Stay over here with Nick. They could have just put Nick Cage in a room with that other Nick Cage and just had them go at each other for 90 minutes, and that would be a brilliant fucking film.
Might did it with Nick Cage.
Yeah, that would have been brilliant. But they trying to jam this other movie in there. We don't need this other stupid movie. Nobody cares about that.
It is profoundly silly. It really is. It's just it's silly on an epic level. But by the standard of recent Nick Cage films, and we're going to talk about another one later too. I have to say the best thing about this for me isn't even Nick Cage. It's Pedro Pascal, who I thought was hilarious. Because he's so worshipful of Nick Cage. He's such the ultimate groupie. And he puts, he's using his accent to great effect. And Tiffany Haddish is kind of wasted. And everybody else in this thing is just kind of, they all sort of phone it in a little bit. But I enjoyed it for the most part. Low expectations, right? You go in with low expectations, and
Did they put
some of those Cage films, so automatically there's low expectations. I mean, I wanted to. Well, here sometimes Nick Cage will stumble into, possibly by accident, a good film. Like Mandy was great.
Are we going to talk about Pig? Are we going to talk about Pig?
We're going to talk about Pig later. We're going to talk about Pig.
Okay,
we can.
Okay,
but
we're going to talk about it later. Yeah.
Okay.
Pig was good, but this one I just felt that. I kept watching it, hoping that it would somehow fulfill its satirical promise. And it would always get halfway there, but never quite get it over the top.
So, The Secrets of Dumbledore, which is on 4K now, the latest in the Harry Potter prequel series, which has been really so amazing, but it's had a problem. And that problem was Johnny Depp. And when Johnny Depp was accused of beating up Amber Heard, they dropped him like a hot rock before he redeemed himself, apparently, in the eyes of people with this latest trial. And they replaced him with Mads Mikkelsen. And sure enough, you know what? That was the problem. Because Mads Mikkelsen makes this film... Actually, no, I take it back. You know what? It makes no difference. This film's still...
No. Yeah. Mads in this film, for one thing, Johnny Depp, he prepared this very specific character, with the white skin and the white hair and the white, all that. And how Johnny does. And Mads wouldn't do any of that.
No, he reverses the character.
He's like, I'm not going to put on that hair. I'm not going to wear that wig. That's all Johnny's crap. I'm not doing it. Well, but Mads, if you don't do it, then you're not doing the character, because that's the character. Even if you look at the character in the book, it says all of that, but he wouldn't do it because Johnny did it first. But you're right. It wouldn't make any difference. This movie didn't work, man. This movie didn't work.
I am, and look, don't get me wrong. I'm rooting for this, for Fantastic Beasts to be its own franchise, to somehow work. But it's not working, and I'm trying to figure out why. Is it because we're expecting it to be Harry Potter? Is it because it's not really about the kids? It's more about the adults? Is it because the characters aren't... I mean, I can't quite put my finger on why I don't enjoy these movies. Why
Because
why
the
do I
thing
not
is
enjoy
that
them?
a lot of the Harry Potter films were based on books, and a whole generation of kids grew up on these characters. They were the same age as Harry when the books came out, and they grew up with Harry through the books and through the movies. Now you're talking about characters who seem like they don't, nobody grew up with them. The attachment is not the same, right? Now it's
Yeah.
just is it a thrilling tentpole film? Does it scratch that itch? As opposed to, like, I grew up with these people and I want to see their next adventure because I feel so connected to them. But with all these Fantastic Beasts ones, you just don't get it. It's just a typical tentpole exciting movie with a big overblown theatrical climax.
Yeah, yeah. This is a movie about a bunch of adults. And look at it. God, look at Jude Law's hairline, for God's sakes. You're 50. And they're walking around these movies with these sticks. You know, they got me babbling. What the hell? Who is this for, man? I'm almost 60. I don't want to see this shit. That's which, you.
Yep. Valid point. So Downton Abbey, A New Era, looks gorgeous on 4K. Absolutely spectacular. I have a theory with this, gentlemen. Tell me if I'm onto something. So there's a thing that used to happen in the 1970s with TV shows, which is every TV show had its territory. It took place in a certain city, in a certain milieu, on a certain block, whatever. Even if it was a love boat, you're basically just going from Los Angeles to Puerto Vallarta and back and forth, right? And if you wanted to get really special, you would have a season premiere that went somewhere else. They went on vacation. So you get Charlie's Angels season 2, Angels in Paradise. They're in Hawaii. Oh my gosh, they're in Hawaii. They're going to be wearing bikinis. It's going to be a whole new thing. Or you get the Love Boat, the Alaskan cruise, or some Caribbean cruise. Oh, they're not just going to Puerto Vallarta. So we got a whole new thing. So this is Downton Abbey. They're going to the south of France. And I don't care. I love it. I had a whole lot of fun. It's basically Maggie Smith just making wisecracks and everybody else just along for the ride.
And by the way, Sex and the City, one of the Sex and the City sequels was the same thing.
Yeah,
they went to, like, Dubai or something.
Yeah, just go somewhere else and it feels fresh. So that's what they're doing here.
That Downton Abbey movie. Yeah. How does it do at the box office as a measure?
Did really well.
Okay,
it did well.
Filmed a Marvel movie or a Bond movie. It did. A grown up.
It's solid. It was solid. It's audience. Yep. The audience for these things, they follow it, and they don't spend a ton on them either. You know, it's basically a TV budget, which is, still huge these days. But the audience for these things, they come, especially in the UK. So it did fine. It's not like going to make $1 billion worldwide, but it's definitely it made its money back for sure. And a bunch of extras on here, and I love the fact that it's 4K too. There's nothing like the crevices in Maggie Smith's face in 4K.
Hey, dude, can we talk about Edge of Tomorrow?
I love dive in
Edge of Tomorrow. It is just one of the best sort of time. It's just a Doug Liman film. Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt. And the thing that I love most about Edge of Tomorrow is that Emily Blunt is the star of Edge of Tomorrow. Not Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise, right? But Emily Blunt is the bad, and you just buy every moment of her in that movie. I think it's close to one of Bill Paxton, the great Bill Paxton's last movies. Maybe not the last movie, because he had that TV series that he was in when he passed. But it's one of his last movies, and it's just this beautifully done movie. It is so wonderfully worked out that screenplay by Chris McQuarrie and Jess Butterworth. In order to make that movie pay off at the end. And that movie has the best payoff. That and Looper are my two favorite sort of times.
Yeah.
They just pay off beautifully. And, if you look closely and you can't find any holes, and it's just action packed and it's fantastically good. And Emily Blunt's a badass in that movie. Love Edge of Tomorrow.
I agree. Mark, you got any thoughts?
I love this movie. And the thing is that I really felt like I was going to hate it, right? Because he's got to relive he's got to go back a day all the time. And you're like, how are they going to stretch out the same day over the course of a 2-hour movie? And of course, they find ways to do it. And McQuarrie, with the Mission Impossible films, he has proven himself one of the smartest tentpole people out there. I mean, I would love to see him direct a James Bond film. The guy gets Star Wars film. That dude can do anything. If you look at someone like Macquarie versus someone like, let's say, JJ, it's just leaps and bounds different in terms of just the depth of the characters, the complexity of the story, the fact that you're watching a bunch of sci-fi nonsense, but you just love it. It's just so well constructed, super smart script. It's really well done. I liked it a lot.
The funny thing is, this really goes in that category of Groundhog Day movies, but we don't think of it as being one of those because it is so smart and so original on its own. You don't go, oh yeah, I would put, like, if you make a list of Groundhog Day inspired movies, right? You'd have a whole bunch of them, Palm Springs and Groundhog Day, and there's a whole litany of them. And you would not normally go there with this because it still feels like its own movie. It's really, it is very sharp. The audio on this is to absolutely die for. The DTS HD master audio is just really just crisp as can be. It's beautiful. A lot of cool extras on here too. Storming the Beach, Weapons of the Future, and On the Edge with Doug Liman are all.
That's a really interesting career. Doug. You think about Doug, right?
Oh, Liman? Yeah.
Swingers. Tiny little movie.
Yeah.
These guys.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith,
but then
he
ends up having this career. I don't know. I thought Doug was going to walk the path of one of these guys. Smart little talky movies.
I did too.
But Doug, that was just an introduction. Doug always had it in him to make big ass movies. That's really kind of what he's been doing. I wouldn't mind seeing him do another Swingers-esque, something with people sitting and talking and doing and coming and going sort of thing. But this Swingers and what's the other one? Go.
Well, when he did Swingers and Go, you had no idea that he could actually do something like Edge of Tomorrow or Jason Bourne or American Made, which, by the way, I like. American Made was kind of the last time that Tom Cruise attempted to play a real character in a non-tentpole film. And I actually think that film is a little bit, it's not great, but it's kind of overlooked, American Made. But I could not have predicted Doug Liman's career based on Swingers and Go.
Yeah, I hear you. It's an interesting career. So the Edna Ferber novel that became the great George Stevens movie Giant is on 4K. I think this is a cool, awesome move by Warner Brothers. I love the fact that they're putting catalog titles like this on 4K, especially because Giant, by the way, gentlemen, if you remember, movies had moved to widescreen by this time, but George Stevens said, no, I want Giant to still be Academy aspect ratio. Now, that would be a no big deal today because it'd be like, oh, so you mean IMAX? But no, he just said, no, I want the square frame. And it's an absolutely beautiful film. I think this movie totally holds up. It's sort of like There Will Be Blood before There Will Be Blood, but I think James Dean just knocks it out of the park here. I mean, these are three amazing powerhouse performances. Elizabeth Taylor, Rock Hudson, and James Dean, but James Dean just owns this movie through and through. It's one of the great all-time screen performances. And I couldn't love this movie anymore. I don't know how you guys feel, but I think it's great.
How's it look in 4K? Because, look, yeah.
Phenomenal. I'll tell you, the Warner Brothers people do I think of all the studios, they're the ones who do the archival stuff the best. Everything I look at from the Adventures of Robin Hood to things like Giant, even to stuff like freaking Dumbledore, right? More recent stuff. They preserve the theatrical look. They're very attuned to the grain. They're very attuned to the difference between digital and film, making sure that they respect the timing of the film. They don't oversaturate the colors. They preserve the grain. It's really beautiful. You feel like you're watching film when you watch this on 4K. You really do.
I always thought it was so
terrific.
funny that this is a movie in which James Dean is playing a character named Jet Rink, opposite an actor named Rock Hudson.
I do find it odd that they would, and God love them for releasing it on 4K, but don't forget, this is like a 200-minute, 70-year-old movie. So I don't know that the Giant, OG Giant fan is going to even know what 4K is. And at 200 minutes, I don't know that the average 4K, consumer is going to say, get me Giant. I'm curious as to what hole this was filling in terms of like, well, this is going to move a lot of units. just don't know.
I think for Warner Brothers, it comes down to the brand. I think there is a focus at Warner Brothers internally. In fact, I know there is. That one reason for the success of Disney and a reason that other studios struggled, why 20th Century Fox struggled and had to sell itself to Disney, why Paramount is struggling, why Universal is desperately trying to reboot the monsters again and again and again, is because Disney it has a solid brand. And despite all of their missteps, with public relations and Bob Chapek firing his competitor and, having fights with Florida and having fights with Scarlett Johansson and all the things that are troubling Disney. The fact is Disney is still a strong brand company. People know what Marvel means. They know what Disney means. They know what Lucasfilm means. And I think Warner Brothers understands that it has a great brand and it needs to dip into that library to shore that brand up, to say, this is who we are. And that's a small investment to be able to do that going forward. I think it's
prestige
very smart.
To a certain extent, I guess.
There you go. That's it. Prestige is the word. Shall we get some new movies like Pig and Nicolas Cage again?
You guys both saw, I see at the stop, at Rifkin's Festival, which I didn't see. And we had an interesting conversation about Woody and all of that the other day when we were chit chatting. So get me up to speed on Rifkin. And is there anything, does he put anything?
We'll start with Rifkin, then we'll move to Pig. So Mark, your thoughts on Rifkin's Festival? The last Woody Allen. Might be the very last Woody Allen for all we know after what he told Alec Baldwin, but go.
Look, no one loves Woody Allen more than the three of us. Let's face it. He's Woody Allen. He will always be Woody Allen. I don't care who he married. I don't care any of that stuff. He is the king. And he always will be the king. And I'm going on record as saying he's the king. That said, this is like Woody's 49th feature. And I'm telling you, he's got to top out at 50 and call it a day because this is not good. I mean, I guess at some point, look, he's still got Victoria Serraro shooting it. So it looks great. And it takes place at a film festival with artists cross-hatching each other in terms of like who's sleeping with who. But it just felt very derivative. It felt like something he wrote 20 years ago and pulled out of a drawer and never really polished it up. I just don't understand what he's thinking. It doesn't seem like he's really been on automatic pilot in the last few films, right? So it's got, it's just, the cast is fine. Wallace Shawn is another stand-in for Woody, complaining and kvetching to his doctor and to his therapist and whatnot. But I just feel like it drags on and on. There's nothing new. It's not that funny. And I just feel like it's a copy of a copy of a copy.
It's a little bit of that, but I appreciated that he seems to be mourning all of those movies that he loved, the French New Wave movies and, Bergman and Buñuel. And I feel like this is a statement saying those movies are becoming, they're disappearing in the rearview mirror and nobody but I remembers them. And there's a sadness to this. And, would it have made more sense for him to put himself in the movie? Probably. But the fact that he didn't makes it even sadder. So
it's true, and if this is his like cry from the heart to get people to revisit these great movies that he loved as a kid, I think that's a great message to send. But I just feel like it's being sent by by a guy whose his writing is not that tight and trenchant, and he doesn't get his points across the way he used to, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that way that really resonates. It just feels very flabby. And so I feel like even that point is kind of lost, and like you're just so bored.
It's really interesting. I mean, Woody, and I think it was, I think Tyrone. I think Midnight in Paris is about 10 years ago, 2010, 11, something like that. And he had that run, Midnight in Paris, Tyrone with Love, Blue Jasmine. And I don't know. Then around 2015, that's when a whole bunch of and then we get Cafe Society and Wonder Wheel, which is really not good. I didn't see Rainy Day in New York either. I know you guys did. And I keep thinking to myself, particularly after that really good mid 2000s run, that maybe Woody he'll get it back, but he's only getting older. So I don't know.
Yeah.
He's getting older. He's not getting better.
Let's talk about Nick Cage again in Pig. This had a little bit of support when we were voting A lot of people in the room wanted to give Best Picture to Pig. How you two feel about that? Oh, there's a long
Well,
silence.
dude, look,
Everyone?
I enjoyed Nick Cage and Pig. The film is about this guy, sort of hermit guy who has a pig that you can find truffles in very fancy restaurants. You know, pay him a lot of money to get his pig. And somebody kidnaps your pig, and then this guy, Nick Cage, has to go out and he has to find his pig, and he works his way through this sort of underworld of Oregon, whatever. You're looking for his pig, and you know, there's a whole bunch of psychological, philosophical stuff going on here. I don't really give a crap about any of that, but I did like seeing Nick Cage in that beard just sort of walk through this movie. Not terribly unlike Michael Douglas in Falling Down.
Oh yeah,
Just
it's a good analogy.
and if so, all of the crap that's going on with the guys with, who's going, I don't care about any of that stuff. But a guy on a mission, that was interesting to me. But no, not Best Picture.
Here's the thing. To me, it's basically a revenge film, and because it has Nick Cage in it, everyone kind of thought, oh my goodness, it's Head and Shoulders. But no, it's still a revenge film. It's about a guy with a pig. They take his pig, and he wants revenge. It doesn't really go much further than that. For my money, I mean, it's fine. It's well done. I get it. I understand that it's a pig, and people are reading a lot of metaphorical things into it, and it is a relatively tame performance for Nick Cage, which is unusual in these days. But did you ever see the Brian Cox movie Red from a few years ago?
Is that the one where he's a spy along with
No,
Bruce Willis?
stop. No. Red. He's a guy with a dog, and his dog is named Red, and he has a run-in with these punk rednecks who kill his dog.
I saw that. I saw that. It's good.
These punk rednecks kill his dog, and then he goes all Liam Neeson on him. And I even though that was much more extreme, like he does things, Nick Cage would never go to that extreme, and there are reasons why Brian Cox does it. I found that to be a more satisfying way of telling that kind of a story. So there it is. Boy, I'll tell you, Stephen Daldry, what an unusual director he's turning out to be. So Stephen Daldry, for the last few years, I mean, he's did Billy Elliot, of course, and he did The Reader, and then he did The Crown, and he's been doing The Crown on television now for 4 or 5 years, whatever it's been. And then during the pandemic, he decided to get back to features, and he made this pandemic feature with Sharon Horgan and James McAvoy called Together. And I feel like, most of these pandemic films, and we got another one here with Anthony Hopkins, but most of these pandemic films are not going to age very well. I feel like it's sort of self-therapy on a certain level, but this is about a couple of people who, were locked down together for a solid year during the pandemic, and it's pretty much a two-hander. I don't know that it works. I think it's interesting in that these two actors are clearly giving it their all, and Daldry's trying to do something interesting. But I sort of feel like this movie's already dated. I don't know. Did you see this?
Three people in the movie: the little boy, and James and Sharon.
Yeah,
that's the movie. Some people on the phone or whatever. But that's pretty much the movie, and they deeply hate each other. And are reviewing all of the reasons why they hate each other in this movie. And you know what? That's at first it's funny, and then it becomes sort of disturbing. And then I just decided that I hated them both too. And I'm not sure that's where that movie wanted to land me, but that's where it landed me. I'm like, you're right. You're both horrible.
Yeah.
And so that's where it landed.
Now that you mention it, it's kind of where I'm at. So Fatherhood is interesting, mainly because this was on Netflix, but it's a Sony film, and Sony clearly reserves rights to take things off Netflix and release them as disc, and I think that's very interesting. Nonetheless, all of that business stuff aside, Fatherhood it feels like a movie that was made in 1992. It doesn't it? Doesn't it feel like one of those movies where those dad movies? There's a whole series of dad movies, neglectful dad movies, and all Schwarzenegger was in some of them, and Steve Martin was the father of the bride, and then Parenthood, and it's like there was just all that parent movie stuff. So that's where this movie sort of feels like it belongs, but that's not a bad thing. I think that's a great thing. Yeah. Kevin Hart. I think he has yet to peak, and I think this is a lot of fun, and I love the hashtag girl dad, because I've got some of those Kobe Bryant shirts that say girl dad. I'm a girl dad too. Sorry, that's where I live. I like fatherhood. You guys?
Yeah. No, it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Mark, did you see it?
Good performances too.
I did not see Fatherhood, although I'm curious to get your thoughts on Kevin Hart, because all the comedians want to go serious, and even if this film is like generic and formulaic, it's still not Kevin Hart doing his Kevin Hart thing. It seems like he's calmed down. And do you think that he can someday? I mean, maybe not. Ordinary people too, as you said earlier in the episode. But could he go serious?
I think he can, but I don't know why he would.
Yeah. He's got a drama in him. I don't know. I suppose it depends on the movie. It does. What is that thing he did with? There was an adaptation of that French film.
Oh yeah, the Untouchables. The Untouchables. He did the American version of that.
Yeah, and there was a certain sort of thing. He was still doing Kevin Hart sort of jokes and whatever, but there was a certain sort of drama in that movie too. And he was
playing an ex-con.
There's the thing.
Yeah, I like Kevin Hart when he's just being Kevin Hart. I really do. I just think he has a great persona. I think he brings a lot of positivity to his movies, and I still want him to host the Oscars. I really do. I want to scratch that itch. I want to scratch that itch.
He'd be good.
So the Cinderella, this is that TV Cinderella that was just doesn't work on any level whatsoever. It kind of tried to do an alternative Cinderella. The one with Billy Porter and Camila with Billy Porter as the fairy godmother. Yeah, Pierce Brosnan's in it, and Minnie Driver's in it. Idina Menzel's in it. It's true. They try. I just think this is really terrible. Because it doesn't really sufficiently reinvent it in any alternative way. And what really hammered that home for me is when we were in London some months ago and saw Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cinderella, which just closed after a year, and it's gonna open next year on Broadway. And we listened to that soundtrack. I kid you not. We listened to that soundtrack in the car and at home about a dozen times a day, and have done for months. It's amazing. And it's a totally alternative Cinderella, but it's like a smart alternative, right? I just don't, I feel like this one tried to be shocking without being smart, but there it is, Cinderella. Mothering Sunday, the Eva Husson film. Did anybody see that? With Colin Firth, Olivia Colman, Glenda Jackson? I did not see that one, baby.
I got so many emails to see this movie. They emailed me 3 times a day to see this thing. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to see this thing on principle because I'm tired of getting your emails.
So I think for the Downton Abbey crowd, because this thing is set in kind of the same general period of time, 1924, I think for the Downton Abbey crowd, this is an absolutely wonderful, wonderful movie. Is it quite Downton Abbey? No. It's sort of scratching at being that kind of a thing. But I do think that Eva Husson or Husson, or however you pronounce it, is a talented director. And I think that there are more good things in store from her. So I think it's worth watching if this is your genre. But Colin Firth is never bad. Look, you put Colin Firth, Olivia Colman, and Glenda Jackson in a movie, even if they're playing supporting characters, that is just always worth paying attention to. Another pandemic movie, Zero Contact. I had to review this for Film Week. I believe I've been quoted in a number of articles as calling it the worst Zoom meeting ever. This is what they did with this. They decided to try to make a thriller during the pandemic using nothing but people's cell phones and having them do nothing but stay home. So the whole thing is predicated around Anthony Hopkins is some like sketchy pharmaceutical magnate who has died and has left there's some kind of a conspiracy that's been left in his wake, and they're all connecting to each other on video saying, what are we going to do about this? And while they're watching each other on video, some shady character in black is like killing them one by one. And you're seeing this on camera and you're, oh, he's coming for me next. And then in the end, there are a bunch of surprises that aren't really surprises. And then the movie ends and you realize I've been watching cell phone footage for the past 90 minutes. I feel totally ripped off. This is not surprisingly a grindstone film for Lionsgate. Grindstone will grind them out even during a pandemic. But man, I want to know how much money they threw at Anthony Hopkins for this thing because it's not enough.
I don't know why he would do that. I don't know what. I mean, maybe they thought he could do it because he can do it from his home.
Yeah.
He didn't leave. It's not only did he not leave his home, I don't think he left the chair. I truly, it's like, I think Anthony Hopkins probably got a phone call and he said, what? You're going to pay me how much? To sit here, turn my camera on, read these lines. How much? One day? Oh, all right. Why would you not? Like, hi, we're going to pay you $1 million for one day, for like 3 hours. Just sit there, read these lines into the camera. It's the worst.
The only reason why I wanted to see that is because I had an ex-girlfriend who was very good friends with him and his wife. So I met Hopkins a number of times. And so one of the places we used to hang out was his art studio in Pacific Palisades. So he's got his home and then he has an art studio. And I think that he shot his parts of the movie at the art studio. And the only reason why I want to see that movie is to see whether I'm right. Otherwise, I couldn't care less.
Yeah, that would be interesting. You should then watch it and tell me so that I don't ever have to get near it again. That would be that's what friends do, Mark. That's what friends do. Just a few more here, and then we should talk about the Criterions and Arrows, and then I'll let you guys go and we'll get into some anime. So, interesting film by a director named Ninja Thyberg. She spells her name like ninja, but it's not Ninja Thyberg. It's Ninja. I believe she's Swedish. Starring Sophia Capel. It's called Pleasure. This is presumably Okay, Tim.
I've seen this movie.
Yeah, well, good. Let's all talk about it. This is like the leave it. Yeah, here we are. 3 guys. Oh, I saw that movie about the inside look at the porn world. Yeah. Oh, wow. What a coincidence. So, I've seen a number of movies that purport to sort of go inside porn and how horrible and dirty and miserable it is. And it's never fun. There's always some level of abuse or rape or something in there that makes you wonder why they even wanted to make the film. But go ahead. Talk about it, guys. What'd you think?
That's what we have. This young girl who, for no particular reason, actually decides that she wants to get into not just the porn business, but the extreme porn business. And she's fairly enthusiastic about it. And she goes off into this business, and we watch all of the things that happen to her, and it's sort of basically how she sort of like goes down this rabbit hole. And the young actress who's doing all of this, she's engaged in all this stuff, and of course it's a lot of simulated porn and simulated sex and simulated this, but it's very much constructed, particularly with the sound mixes, to make you feel like you're watching abusive, extreme porn. There's a whole rape sequence in it, a sequence where she feels like she's being raped anyway. And then you have all these guys who call themselves agents or directors or producers or whatever. They're just pimps. I'm like, dude, you can call yourself a producer, but I know a pimp when I see one. So, whatever with your title there, homie. That's pimp talk. That's it. But I kept thinking to myself, look, I'm not exactly sure why you decided to go into extreme porn. You might have just wanted to do your workaday porn before you went straight into that. So that's kind of nutty. And she has a phone call with her parents, but I never understood. Why are you here, sweetheart? Why are you? Go home. This is not a movie about some abuse, blah blah blah. And they got pulled off the street. Now she's in porn. But no, honey, you talked to your mom an hour ago. Go home. But I don't know. So that's I found it extremely uncomfortable, and I'm not sure it represents anything that's actually true. So there you go.
Mark.
Yes, I'm now here's the thing. I'm going to say that I liked it. I'll tell you why. First of all, this thing should be rated NC-90. Okay, this thing is so graphic. This within 5 minutes, you're embarrassed for humanity. But the thing with the movie is that it's actually using yes, it's about the porn industry, but it's also what's great about it is that it's about any industry where the line between a worker's like agency and exploitation is just really thin, right? So yes, it's about the porn industry, but it's also about, in the movie she's so ultra competitive that every step up the industry ladder she decides to go, she debases herself further and further until she starts wondering why I'm even doing this, which I think is part of the call of the family, right? And so, and what I find interesting about it is that it's not a porn industry takedown. In the movie, there are just as many porn producers who are careful with her and make sure she's okay and make sure that she's not hurt than there are scumbags. So it's not just about this woman who just goes into this, industry and deals with male scumbags. There are workaday cameramen. There are people who are very caring and nurturing to her to make sure she's okay. And they're scumbags. So I felt like it was very even-handed in its depiction of the porn industry. And so I felt there was a lot more going on there than just like, here's a woman who wants to get banged for a living. So there was more going on. And I did appreciate that. And that's not just, they're not just doing that just to justify all the pornography in it. It is the story. The story is about how any woman or any person who goes into any industry where they feel exploited, something like this, well, not exactly like this, could happen to them. Right.
It's the kind of movie that will make you want to take a shower, except for the fact that it begins with a shower scene and you kind of don't want to reenact any part of the movie.
This thing was like, wait, what was the movie that we saw? It was what was the Ginger Root movie? It was the movie where a guy.
Oh gosh, yes. Battle in Heaven.
What is it?
Battle in Heaven. That Battle in Heaven, the Regatas film. The Mexican film.
That's the one that starts with
yes, it is. That is with the
paunchy, fat, ugly, middle-aged guy in full bloom. And then you said that his member looked like a ginger root.
You did. You're the one that said looked like you. I sat there. I made you watch this at your place, and the first thing you said was, "What the? Oh, it looks like a ginger root." And there you go.
I said that. You said that.
You said that. That was you. So, from the Sublime to Liam Neeson in Blacklight, they're gonna need more men. So it's basically Taken. He's a guy, government agent, and he's supposed to keep people quiet, and then suddenly his wife or his daughter and granddaughter are in danger, and he's got to go rogue. It's exactly the same movie. Liam Neeson's made this 17 times in the past 5 years. I will just say this about the movie. Aidan Quinn became an old man somehow. When did that happen?
How did he get older than Liam Neeson? How's that possible? I'm sure Liam Neeson is at least a decade older than Aidan Quinn, yet Aidan Quinn is somehow older than Liam Neeson. They reversed.
This is why... I know it's weird. Let me tell you why Liam Neeson's pushing 70, and this is why it's so great right now that he's making these movies, because he is holding it up for all of those 70-year-old fat alcoholic Irishmen who are sitting in pubs somewhere around Dublin saying, I could do just like Liam. I could do that. I could take him out just like Liam. That's what's great about Liam Neeson. Yes.
Wait, Tim, here's my theory
as
to why Liam Neeson is doing all these stupid movies.
Yeah.
Because 10, 15 years ago, he lost his wife to a tragic accident, and that's pretty much the moment when he started to become an action star. So I think he's doing all these movies as a way to, in his head, save his wife. Because in all these movies, he's saving his family, he's saving his daughter, he's saving his wife, and he's doing in these movies what he couldn't do. There's no way he could. I mean,
that is a fantastic theory. That is a fantastic.
I don't know what that is. So that's what I think he's using these movies as a way to save his wife.
Freudian, but it feels very accurate. This movie, there's Freudian. This movie is interesting in this way. The character he's playing has that thing. What is it? That thing you get when you got to turn the lights off and you have to check all the exits and then you have to hit the light switch a certain number of times. What is that? That's a thing, right? The character has that. And that made this so fucking funny to me. He's got to kill 15 people, but he's got to turn the light switch off 5 times. And it was just hysterical. But nevertheless, he still managed to kill everybody in the room.
So for some reason, Blumhouse decided that the Drew Barrymore Firestarter was just not the masterpiece that it was meant to be. So they remade Firestarter for some reason without Drew Barrymore and without George C. Scott. And the result is that you have a movie that is exactly the same as the previous Firestarter, only without Drew Barrymore and without George C. Scott. I don't really understand why this exists, but there it is. They redid it. Gentlemen,
I got
anything else to say?
Can I say, by the way, just as one thing I'll say, Zac Efron, who knew that this pretty boy, from whatever stupid show he did, would wind up being a halfway. I mean, did you see that Ted Bundy thing he did?
Yeah.
He's very good. He's very good, and he's very talented.
I was shocked. I was like, who is this guy? He's amazing.
Was good.
No, he's very good.
As were a lot of those kids. High School Musicals, right? Is that it? High School Musicals? He's one of those kids, right?
Yep.
He was actually really good in those. When they made the actual movies, I think it was a TV show, but they made a couple of actual movies, or at least one. And he was really good in that. And I remember thinking to myself, if he can beat his looks, he could have a career. He's going to have to pull off a Pitt. Pitt had to do it too. People forget Pitt was ridiculously beautiful. Depp had to do it. But they were able to do it. They were able to beat their looks with actual talent and skill. And he played he was in that movie about Orson Welles, Zach. He played Orson Welles as, I don't know, whatever it was. He was wonderful in that movie. And ever since then, I've been like, you know what, kid? Don't let the looks. Sometimes the looks can smash you, but sometimes they get better.
Yeah.
So good work.
So, Tim, I know this drives you crazy, but this animated film that came out from Universal, The Bad Guys. So, just so everybody knows, Tim wrote a movie called The Bad Guys, or just Bad Guys without the. Was starring Sherman Augustus, which won some awards at the Beverly Hills Film Festival some years ago. And so not to be confused with this animated thing.
I have an issue with talking animals. I can't. I can't.
I know.
It's just I can't.
This is about a bunch. This tries to sort of do what Zootopia did a little bit. A world in which there are all these animals. These what do you call it? The world's spawned by talking animals, anthropomorphic animals, anthropomorphized animals. And I guess the animation is fine. It's whatever. It's Universal working with whoever the people are that do the Minions. What is that? Illumination, right? So this is technically DreamWorks, right? But it's that look. And these particularly nasty villains, wolf and piranha and shark and snake and spider. They're like a gang, and they finally get caught, and then they have to do like a Suicide Squad thing, and they have to prove their mettle by doing something good. It's a little bit too wannabe noir, whereas Zootopia is like legit noir, and it doesn't really work very well. It's kind of forced. I guess some kids liked it. My daughter did not like it at all. We had a bunch of kids over. Kids tuned out of this thing in like 20 minutes.
What's the rating on that thing? I thought that thing was rated. That's PG?
PG, action and rude humor. Yeah, it's rude. It's fart jokes. PG for fart jokes. That's where they always go. And a little bit of the action intensity, but I mean it just didn't push the sweet spot for kids. Let's tap out with the Criterion and the Arrow stuff. I want to make mention of the two 4Ks here. Each of them have a 4K this month. They are both tremendous. Criterion's 4K this week is Shaft, the Gordon Parks classic. And Arrow's 4K is an amazing special edition set of Tony Scott's Quentin Tarantino scripted True Romance. And I just think this is, again, let's just say what this is doing for the 4K format. It's really pushing the collector's part of it. I mean, these things are so full of extras. I can't even get into it. I mean, they are just loaded. Interviews and vintage stuff from the 1970s for Shaft, and for a whole bunch of amazing stuff. There's like this wonderful eulogy for Tony Scott by Edgar Wright. I mean, it's really tons of stuff on both of these things. But again, the bottom line is You
Yeah.
get to see Shaft in 4K, and you get to see True Romance in
True.
4K. Very impressive work.
True Romance. If we have this story right, if I have this story right, it's basically the film that paid Quentin the money that allowed him to make, to think he could make anyway, Reservoir Dogs. He was going to he wrote that script.
Correct. That is right.
Had some dough, was going to go, make Harvey Keitel eventually, all that kind of stuff. But True, that is the most wonderfully, I loved that movie. True Romance, back in 90s.
I did too.
It was at the top of my list. It was great. It's just really, I mean, because a lot of people they think early Quentin, they go to Pulp, go to Reservoir. I got to tell you, I think early Quentin, Tony Scott directed the film, of course, but I go to True Romance. That's the one.
Yeah.
Speaking of, so there's that. Shaft, of course, 1973. Look, I always have to say this when Shaft comes up, because because earlier we were talking about black exploitation films. Shaft is not a black exploitation film. It's not a black exploitation film.
It's a studio film.
And it's a mainstream film. Richard Roundtree in that film is a legit private detective with a license to carry that gun. And he's working with the cops. Exploitation film, Superfly. Ron
Gordon Parks Jr.
His son, he's a pimp, a drug dealer. That's a black exploitation film. This is not. So anyway, just have to always say that whenever we talk about those movies.
Yeah, and it is significant to me that the studio film was made by Gordon Parks and the exploitation film was made by Gordon Parks Jr. One was a hero, one was an anti-hero. There's a really interesting generational thing, and you and I have talked about this, but I always think that's really interesting to make that comparison between the two. I love both these sets. I think these movies are both. I just celebrate having them both on 4K. It's a great thing. It's a totally great thing. The rest of our criterions, go through these real quickly, include Stanley Kwan's Rouge, which is a Hong Kong classic that is so wonderful. This is from 1987. One of the early films, just really, really early parts of the Hong Kong New Wave. It was just on the verge at this time. Anita Moy and Leslie Chung, neither of them are with us anymore. So sad, but such a beautiful film, so beautifully shot, a perfect criterion. Director approved. Stanley Kwan is still with us, so Rouge is a must-see for any fan of that. Powell and Pressburger's Tales of Hoffman, another one of those amazing Powell Pressburger movies from their heyday of the 40s and 50s. This is 1951. One of their very, very best films. It's just absolutely gorgeous. It's poetic. Tons of great extras on here, including design sketches and paintings and gallery work and all kinds of other stuff. Really, really interesting. Well, here, I'll get to those in a second. Pink Flamingos, John Waters' Pink Flamingos. Also a director-approved version. Not everybody's cup of tea, but, it's got a lot of fun stuff in it. They've got Divine Trash, the feature-length 1998 documentary about John Waters is on this, so you can celebrate that as well. And then last year's The Worst Person in the World gets a Criterion treatment. What a wonderful movie that is, you guys.
Oh, yeah.
Feelings?
Agreed.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of
a lot of people thought
Trier. He's done several films. He has a little team that he works with there. Anders is in most of those films. This is just really, really good.
It's kind of his best film so far. I think it's wonderful, and it won Best Actress at Cannes. A lot of people thought that it was going to be a front runner for a screenplay with the Oscars. I didn't think so, but it certainly should have been. And then lastly, here is a really interesting movie I've never seen before. This is Ekwa Msangi's Farewell Amor, also a director-approved set. This was made just a couple of years ago, and I have never been overly familiar with Ekwa Msangi, but what an absolutely beautiful, beautiful movie. Tim, are you familiar with Msangi by any chance?
The African the director.
But this takes place in New York. But I mean, I know very, very little about his.
It's a woman.
Is it her? Okay, Ekwa Msangi. See, I'm not that familiar at all. But I thought it's a really interesting.
The thing I know about her is that she was one of Spike's students at. I want to say, where did Spike teach in New York? NYU. Okay, so
NYU.
She's one of his because man, he turned them out. He really, really did. Yeah.
Well, I mean, absolutely beautiful. I mean, is she Angolan?
That's what I was
Do you
wondering.
know?
I'm not sure.
Because
Yeah,
Angola,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
because the background is that this is about a family that was impacted by the Angolan Civil War, and how this reunification happens in New York, and it's a lovely drama. It's really really well done, beautifully written, beautifully directed, tremendous, and I totally off my radar, but I'm wonderful to find this. So there's a commentary on here which I have not listened to, but I certainly will now. It's a beautiful film. Beautiful film. Farewell, Amor by Ekwa Masanji. I hope, I'm not destroying it. So, all right. And then from Arrow, we just got a couple of exploitation-y things here. Old horror classics. The Initiation of Sarah and Edge of Sanity with Anthony Perkins. Both come with a ton of extras on them. As per usual for Arrow, I would say that both are also pretty much strictly for fans of kind of that hammery era of films. The Edge of Sanity is kind of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde
Kay Lenz
thing.
Kay Lenz is in that film. You remember? Do you remember Kay Lenz? Kay Lenz was like the thing for a minute there in the late 70s.
I do. I mean, it's not a faithful Jekyll and Hyde, really, but it's kind of an Anthony Hopkins version of it, trying to take it in the wake of Psycho. And then the Initiation of Sarah, if anybody's seen this, it's got kind of some fun performances by people who aren't really around anymore. Shelley Winters in her exploitation era when she was, and Kay Lenz, the wonderful, awesome Kay Lenz, who was never better than when she was in that Rod Stewart music video. And Morgan Brittany, so this thing has a bit of a following as well. All right, and that should do it, gentlemen. I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna dive into some anime here for the last half hour. But before I let you go, we want to say again, email us at gods@digigods.com or gods@cinegods.com and tell us what you think the new video podcast should be. Give us some ideas for names and things to do and all that kind of jazz, and let us know where you think we should take that. What will garner a faithful audience week out and week in.
And let people know how much weight I should lose in anticipation of doing a video podcast. Should I cap it at 10 pounds, or should I kick it up to like 12 or 15?
Yeah, it's brilliant. All right, gentlemen, I will catch you guys later.
Fellas.
Thanks, guys.
All right. A little bit of something old, a little bit of something new with our anime. We're going to start off with Getter Robo Arc. The Getter Robo universe, of course, goes back decades and decades and decades, goes back at least 50 years. It's the original kind of giant robot and mecha tale, at least the earliest that I'm aware of, long before Transformers or any of the rest of it. This is a more recent continuation after many, many years. The manga that this is based on goes back about 20 years, which is relatively new in the Getter Robo universe. It's a little bit of Starship Troopers here. There's a I think they call it a stellaration. Anyway, these bugs from Andromeda are attacking the Earth. The Earth has to develop new Getter Robo tech to fight them off. Very Starship Troopers, but it's pretty good. Then we also have Tsuki Pro the animation. This is boy band stuff. A lot of anime centers around boy bands and music competitions. That's more of what this is. Does it really translate outside of that world? I guess maybe a little bit. If you like J-pop and K-pop, you'll probably have some fun watching an animated version of it. Needless is a really interesting premise, executed with a little bit of kind of bad, tawdry humor. But in any case, the idea here is that in the future, about 100 years in the future, after a global war, they've wiped out Japan, left this massive, giant crater, and there are fragments in there that have radioactive, that confer, through their radioactivity, confer superpowers on people who collect them, and that's the story. Is it great? No, it's it's sort of more interesting as a premise than anything else. Drifting Dragons, much more recent stuff, sort of future fantasy. as you can tell from the title, it is literally about big, giant, flying dragons, and it's it's sort of like an anime take on how to tame your dragon, the old DreamWorks thing, only without the charm and all of the DreamWorksiness of it. But yeah, this is a pretty interesting universe. Really, really interesting animation. Very, very good. Food Wars, don't want to put too much more time into that. We've talked about this in the past. This is just the continuation of the same saga. This is, right at the end of the first semester of the second year. And, now it's like the sports stuff, except it's in the world of dining and restaurants and having to learn how to cook, and it's fine. The sports stuff we get more of with the volleyball themed Haikyuu to the top. This is I guess it's fine. I never knew that volleyball was much of a big deal in Japan, but clearly, at least this show is, and it's drama on a high school volleyball team. That's it. Very focused on that kind of a world that they routinely explore in anime. Next is Ingress, the animation. I like this quite a lot. I like the world. I like the animation. I like the writing. This is based on actually a game. I normally don't like the game stuff, but this is a mobile game, like one of those augmented reality games, and it's a bit of a noir. It's like a mystical noir. It's about this detective who can just through touch sense the memories and remembrances of not just people but things that he touches. He can like sense the history of a thing, and it's not a cheat. Actually, it's really, really interesting, and the animation is just superb and beautiful. And there's some really, really interesting stuff here related to this this mysterious. It's not even a Hitchcockian MacGuffin device. It's called exotic matter, and it's a really interesting idea. The way the story sort of deals with it. It's very, very cool. Highly recommended. Ingress, the animation. We've speaking of bugs again, and the Starship Troopers obsession. We have the complete TV series of Mushibugyo, which is it again. I don't know what it is with giant insects and this kind of thing. The Mushibugyo is not so much in the Starship Troopers vein of we got to fight the giant bugs off. It's more like they've already invaded and they've become a part of the landscape. In any case, and you have to fight them here now, right? And then you throw in a little bit of samurai action, and the whole thing is very strange. And I think it gears much more toward teen kids, but it's Mushibugyo and it's very, very popular. And who am I to judge? Obsolete is great. This is the complete collection of Obsolete. And this is really, really great mecha. It's very interesting animation. It's very unusual relative to what you normally get from mecha anime. More, alien invasion stuff. But it's the economics of it are very, very interesting. And the robots in this case are known as exoframes, and they've pretty much taken over the planet. So if you like Transformers, if you like Get a Robo, if you like any of the mecha, the futuristic mecha robot themed stuff, you're gonna really, really like this. It's because it takes it in a completely new direction. It's very, very, very well done, and that is Obsolete, the complete collection. Somali and the Forest Spirit. Very interesting. This is based on a fantasy-themed manga. This has been available here on Crunchyroll for quite some time. Really, really quite interesting. Very, very recent. The manga dates back only about 5 or 6 years, and then it was kind of early pandemic that the series was created. So it succeeded by sort of exploiting people being locked down in Japan and elsewhere. and it's about a kind of an alternate universe in which everything is magical. There are all kinds of creatures in the world, and human beings are sort of on the way out. Is there a little bit of Tolkien in this? A little bit of Middle Earth? Yeah, I think probably. But it leans much more heavily into traditional westernized fantasy, which I guess has a following in Japan. So, like you have golems and stuff like that in here, and it's very nicely done. Probably a little thin in the story department. More about sort of flaunting its animation and doesn't really mind cutting corners, but it's worth checking out. Somali and the Forest Spirit. The Legend of Heroes has been around a while. The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky is based on a video game, and I'm not familiar with the game, never played it, don't really understand the whole universe that this takes place in. Kind of tried to stick with it for a couple episodes. It's all right. You can tell that it's based on a game. Feels like you probably should be controlling some of the characters, but it's about this brother and sister. They're trying to go through this land and become protectors, not necessarily spies, but become kind of these elevated civil servants. And there are all of these issues that they face in trying to sort of rise to this position in the land. I'm sure it goes to a very interesting place. I didn't stick around long enough to necessarily see. BTOOOM, another one of these anime series tend to have one of two things with their titles. They will either come up with a very short title that's a little bit silly and has way too much punctuation on it, like usually 2, 3, 4 exclamation points, or they'll be very, very long and they'll tell you the entire subject of it'll be like Throw Mama from the Train done anime style. Anyway, BTOOOM only has one exclamation point, but it has three O's. BTOOOM, if you have to look it up. Originally a manga, and much more recently it is an anime series. And it's basically about a guy who's a video game champion, and the game that he plays is BTOOOM. And that winds up becoming his reality when he finds himself transported to this island, and mystically and magically, and then somehow it turns into kind of a Hunger Games-y thing. And it doesn't explain enough to make its premise credible, but it's very well done. It's very nicely animated, but it could, again, writing is a little bit thin. And then we have Yusibu, otherwise here known as, here's one of those titles again, I couldn't become a hero, so I reluctantly decided to get a job. Again, it has a following, not my kind of thing, but this takes place. This is kind of a child wish fulfillment thing. You learn to become a hero in the world in which this takes place, but the empire has collapsed, and so the program that teaches you how to become a hero is done with. So now he has to go and actually get a real job, and naturally, the job leads him into all kinds of weird areas and a very unusual, strange romance, and it feels like it's probably supposed to be funnier than it actually is, at least to me. Amnesia, very interesting. I think there's a lot of potential to this. I might actually want to watch some of these things again and try to absorb it. The kind of a little bit of anime noir. It's presumably based on a PlayStation game, which I've never heard of, but some people have told me this originates in PlayStation. But it's a really interesting kind of the Japanese do a very good job of taking noir, or at least the structure of noir, and transferring it into the world of anime. And one thing that you get in noir, if you've seen Memento, for example, very often memory is a thing, especially recent noir, modern noir. And that's what this is about. This is, as the title tells you, this is about a young woman who has complete and total amnesia. And in a Groundhog Day kind of a thing, she keeps waking up in the same place. And then she's visited by this ghost, and she has to put all of these pieces together and figure out, who she is, where she is, what's going on that traps her in this strange kind of time loop. So it's a little bit of Memento, a little bit of Groundhog Day, and a lot of traditional anime. Really kind of cool, actually. Does not necessarily go in directions that you would expect it to. Next up, we're about halfway through, trying to make this go quickly. Iraduko, Iroduku, The World in Colors. This takes place not enough in the future, I should say, and it's basically kind of like Tabitha, if we could do that. It's about a young girl from a family of witches, and only it's not funny. It's not a comedy. So she's trying to recover some of her lost abilities, and that winds up in a situation that emulates a recent French film where she meets her younger self. I can't tell you anything else about it because it's a very unusual and sometimes surprisingly moving premise, but it's worth sticking with if you want to see anime that kind of goes in more grown up directions and unusual directions. It's worth checking out. Also originally a manga, which was more recently serialized into an anime television series about 10 years ago, is Place to Place. Yeah, not particularly a fan of this. It's kind of straight up just relationship stuff with some very quirky humor, geared, I think, toward young teens and probably more so toward young girls. Take that for what it is. Got a couple of different seasons. At least, as I understand it, this is how they've been structured as seasons of student council's discretion, and I guess they call it levels, level 1 and level 2. You know what? The school oriented stuff. This all takes place in a kind of an elite academy. I don't really get it. I'm sure that within the culture, it probably has a huge following. It feels a little bit exploitative and fetishistic to me. Little too much. Little too much. Too many hints of hentai in this. But that has its following as well in the genre. Which brings us to something that is also kind of pushes the envelope a little bit too much. Which is, here's another one of those titles. My mental choices are completely interfering with my school romantic comedy. So I think we've talked about this before. I find the premise of this very weird and a little bit hard to appreciate. It's about a student who has a condition, a curse, an affliction, whatever you want to call it. And this is where basically your entire life is a multiple choice process. So if you ever played any of those old video games, Dragon's Lair, the Don Bluth animated stuff, where it's an adventure and you're kind of semi-controlling the video game, but what you're really doing is you're just controlling the branching of these different animated sequences. It's a little bit like that, elevated to a somewhat risque, or at times very risque, kind of role-playing oriented high school drama. I don't get how this is that popular, but it is, and not on me, but it's out there. Make of it what you will. The title alone is worth paying attention to. Stella Women's Academy, High School Division Class C3. That's a mouthful. Again, based on manga, and again, more drama and more politics within school relationships and so forth. In this one, the C3 stands for Command, Control, and Communications, and that's the club in this case that the young woman in question wants to become a party to, and it winds up at a certain point being an excuse for the animators to draw young female characters in all sorts of states of provocative clothing. We'll leave it at that. Very interesting release here, Nana. So Nana ran about I want to say about 15 years ago, something like that. And it's I want to say there's kind of a sliding doors quality to this, but it's not quite exactly the right analogy. It's about two different women named Nana, and what brings them together, and how incredibly different they are, and where their lives and their relationship converge and diverge. Really smart writing, very interesting idea. Not the kind of thing you normally expect to wind up animated. You could have done this as a live action drama as well, but they did it animated, and it's really, really very, very interesting. And you just don't expect it to go where it goes. So for the really grown up stuff that's just a little bit off the regular anime radar, Nana comes really, really highly recommended this week. Infinite Stratos. Yeah, this is fine. It's very, very conventional. We've seen this many, many times before. You've seen all of these mecha devices in many, many other shows. This takes that whole mecha concept, the robots, the future, everything oriented to it, and then it makes it just a little bit just slightly prurient. And I could have done without that. That seems to be a theme this week. But I suppose, the migration of hentai concepts into regular anime is something with which we have to live. Very interesting set here from, and all of these, by the way, that I've been touching on so far have been from the Sentai library through section 23. Sentai continues to do a lot of great work. A lot of the other anime houses seem to have suspended work for the recent few years. Anyway, we now go to Nozomi. From the Nozomi library is Sayonara Zetsubu Sensei. Hopefully I didn't destroy that. So this comes with both a Blu-ray and a book, and the book is very impressive, and it's like 300 and some pages long, and it's a lovely thing to include. So you're getting a lot of your money's worth if you are both a manga and an anime fan. This was originally a Media Blasters title, and people waited for it for a long time. It never came out. And then Nozomi picked it up and has apparently been doing pretty well with it. Basically, it's the story of a Japanese, it's school stuff again, and in this case, it's a kind of centers on a teacher in particular, and how this teacher is dealing with, usually it's the politics of the students. In this case, it's all about the teacher and the teacher's interaction with the students, and one in particular who, well, kind of several, but one in particular really gets gets most of the attention. It's a girls' school, and they're the private stories actually wind up going into a very, very interesting place. So of the school oriented stuff, probably one of the better ones. This is one of the more interesting approaches to the Japanese school politics, because you do see it from the point of view of a teacher. And that again is called Sayonara Zetsubu, Zetsubu Sensei. Gundam, I mean, there's no point in rehashing the entire Gundam universe. This stuff just goes on and on and on and on. This is from the movies that were made as part of the Turna Gundam side of the giant mecha universe of Gundam. This takes place hundreds of years in the future, and the movies are actually pretty good. The movies in this case are Earthlight and Moon Butterfly. Kind of don't try to make sense of them, but within the confines of the Gundam universe, what's nice about these two is that they are pretty self-contained. They don't require you to have done 18 hours of research into what the Gundam universe is and what wars and what generations and all of that stuff. It's not bad there. Here, this is interesting. This is computer animated, so it's 3D CG anime, which we don't get a lot of because it's kind of offensive to the entire concept. But there is some of it, and this takes that into the world of sports, that whole sports thing that we get so much of in anime. And this is Ryoma! Exclamation point, the Prince of Tennis. And I think tennis has become, obviously, for a lot of reasons, more of a big deal in Japan in recent years. More Japanese tennis players on the world stage. So you get kind of you get a family story here. Perhaps the story of the Williams sisters and King Richard and all of that has inspired a little bit of this, but. This is about a kid whose dad was a tennis champion, and he wants to come to the United States and train, get better training in the U.S. And then there are all of the obvious, the tennis politics, the culture politics, fish out of water, and for some reason, then suddenly it has a weird time travel twist. It goes into a fantasy place where it didn't really need to, but interesting because it's different. Just because it's different. One of the best, we're getting to the very best here. One of the best recent animes. It's just unbelievable character design, incredible animation, a beautiful, wonderful, wonderful film. Is Pupel of Chimney Town, and this is one of these beautiful kind of period fantasy. Pieces of anime that just go into these wonderful directions you never ever expect them to. Really, really very cool. It's sort of a Victorian not cyberpunk, Victorian steampunk, sort of a Victorian steampunk storyline. And when you talk about Pupel of Chimney Town, so Chimney Town is kind of this steampunky Victorian fantasy land. And Pinocchio might not be the best analogy, but Pupel is the name of this creature who is made of garbage in this very sort of industrial revolution era fantasy land. And it really, really goes into some fascinating places. The animation is beautiful. The character design is beautiful. The story is unpredictable. And it's very, very touching in the end. It's really, really worth checking out. Pupel, Poupelle of Chimney Town. Beautifully, beautifully done anime. My good friend Charles Solomon, who is the anime expert, the animation expert, for a long time has been recommending I get hold of this for my daughter. It is Panda Go Panda. Panda with exclamation points after both times. This is from Isao Takahata, one of the great all-time anime experts. This is released from Shout Factory as part of their arrangement with G-Kids. And it really is wonderful. Again, it skews very young. This is for, if you're 11, you're probably already too old for this, unless you're anime aficionado. But it really, really, really is beautiful. It's very, very sweet. It's funny. It's a Big Hero 6 comes to mind sometimes, and I'm not a big fan of Big Hero 6, but I think the whole idea of this giant panda and the little girl and her relationship with it, it's really quite beautiful and very fun and very funny. Best animated film of last year by far, even though it didn't wind up going all the way at the Oscars, was Mamoru Hosoda's Belle. Absolutely extraordinary, wonderful. powerful, imaginative, takes anime into a whole new direction. Very, very strong. If you've seen any of Mamoru Hosada's previous work, you kind of know a little bit what to expect. Basically, this is Beauty and the Beast. This is an anime version of Beauty and the Beast, but it's done in a much more aggressive way than I think. It doesn't replace the Disney Beauty and the Beast, not by any means. It's not trying to. It's just trying to do something different with it, and it does. It finds all kinds of fascinating, wonderful new ways of reinventing the story, and it is absolutely astonishing. The bonus features are great. There's stuff on the music, and there's an interview with Hosada who goes into great detail on the evolution and the technique and everything else. This is a great thing to have. Belle is essential. One of the great recent works of anime was Millennium Actress by Satoshi Kon. This has been out many times previously. It is out once again in a steelbook edition. This is also from Shout. There's nothing particularly new here. It's just it's a steelbook. It has a little booklet in it and a new director's interview. You can watch this with the English cast. The English voice cast. I would say don't do that. Stick with the Japanese voice cast. It's much better. But if you already have this, no reason to necessarily upgrade. If you don't have it, the steelbook is a nice thing to have on the shelf. And then finally, there is a trilogy of films that have been, well, not a trilogy, they're not technically a trilogy, but a trio of films that have been released through the Shout Factory G-Kids arrangement, all of them by the great director Makoto Shinkai, who recently had done Weathering with You and Your Name. Your Name was a big deal when the LA Film Critics voted that year. Everyone loved Your Name. It just came out of the blue, and it's just fantastic. And so Shinkai is being rediscovered to some degree. All three of these films are absolutely first rate, really first rate. This is world-class cinema, and it just happens to be that these are animated films. But if these had been live-action films, we'd still be talking about them. It's not just about the animation. It's about the writing. It's about the characterization. It's about the directing. It's about the acting. It's really excellent. The three films in question are Children Who Chase Lost Voices, The Place Promised in Our Early Days, and lastly, 5 centimeters per second. So once again, the three films are Children Who Chase Lost Voices. The second film is The Place Promised in Our Early Days, and the last is 5 centimeters per second. I would have to say, of the three, I am probably most fond of 5 centimeters per second. They're all worth checking out, and I'll just say this very briefly. That there is romance, pulling off romance, a credible romance in anime is very hard. There are films that do it. I've never seen one that does it as incredibly powerfully as 5 centimeters per second. It's magical, it's poetic, it's powerful, and it does things that animation just typically doesn't do, because the nuances of certain relationships are very hard to capture when you have to animate faces. When you're dealing with actors, live action actors in the moment, much easier to capture certain emotional nuance. But Shinkai is not that kind of director. He pushes animation into places where it historically is typically not considered a strong tool. And that's what makes this so refreshing and so powerful. And it's incredibly mature filmmaking for anime by any standard. So 5 centimeters per second. And then, obviously you can't go wrong with The Place Promised in Our Early Days, which was his debut film, and is just, as you can tell, this guy's going to be unbelievable. He's absolutely going to be a totally powerful filmmaker. Very ambitious for a debut film. And then, finally, Children Who Chase Lost Voices. No, nothing slouchy at all either. It's fantasy, kind of a fantasy epic, and has a lot of mythology in it that takes a little bit to sort of wrap your head around, but that's okay. It's working within the genre, and it does so very effectively. And that is it for our anime segment this week. Thanks for sticking around. Again, email us at gods@digigods or gods@cinegods.com. Tell us what you think the new video podcast should be. give us some suggestions for the title, for the name of it. But it's going to be a broad-based entertainment industry thing. We are still in the early stages of developing this and figuring out where it's going to live and how it's going to live. But would love your feedback, because ultimately, without an audience, there is no podcast. So, looking forward to your feedback. With that, we will see you soon in a few weeks. Have a great summer. Have great vacations wherever you may be going.